Picture this. You're a university professor. You've got a massive stack of final exams sitting right there on your desk, and you are meticulously grading your students' papers. Now, what if you took that exact same strict, completely objective grading rubric and applied it to the political contenders in a high-stakes national election? It's a pretty wild concept, right? Well, that's exactly the metaphor we're exploring in today's Explainer. We're diving into a brief but deeply insightful analysis written just before the highly anticipated 2023 Nigerian general elections, looking at how one educator used literally a century of history to grade modern politicians. Let's get into it. So here's our roadmap for today. We've got 1. Nigeria decides, the context. 2. Grading the contenders. 3. A century of history. 4. Crucial lessons for 2023. And finally, 5. The vision for victory. All right, Section 1, Nigeria decides, the context. To really grasp the weight of this analysis, we've got to place ourselves firmly in February 2023.
That was a remarkably tense, pivotal moment just days before the general elections. The nation was totally at a crossroads, and voters were desperate to make sense of the candidates in front of them. And that brings us to the architect of this whole framework, Oluyomi Oladavid. She is a Nigerian policy influencer and educator. In her own words, she describes herself as someone who loves people and is deeply concerned about global development. Her explicit goal? To generate solutions, influence policy, and, most importantly for us today, provide clarity. It's entirely through her eyes, as an educator wrapping up her semester grading, that we get this unique lens for the 2023 elections.
Moving right along to Section 2, Grading the Contenders. This is where her central metaphor really takes shape. She proposes that instead of getting swept up in all the campaign rhetoric, voters should actually use recent history as a strict grading rubric. Think of history as providing these handy scoring guidelines that citizens can use to literally grade the contenders based on their track records. Her personal thesis is incredibly clear here. She writes, "I am really working for a united Nigeria to win over all things and everyone else." She's arguing that for true progress, nation building and shared prosperity absolutely must win out over religious sentiments, ethnic prejudice, and selfish ambition. She's explicitly framing her entire analysis around this ultimate goal of a unified, winning Nigeria. Section 3. A century of history. To understand what this winning Nigeria looks like, she does something fascinating. She treats the last century of Nigerian history as a rich data set, breaking the timeline down into distinct reasoning points. She starts us off in 1914 with the amalgamation. That's the moment the British colonial masters welded the northern and southern protectorates together. At this point, in her words, the intentions of the British won. Then, 1960 marks political independence, where the forward-looking founding fathers won out. By 1963, a landmark constitution was set, but then she points to 1967 and the Civil War, noting critically that internal conflict completely stalls development and shatters social cohesion. For her, the historical data proves that peace is the only viable option. Continuing on her timeline, we jump to 1986. This was marked by the Structural Adjustment Program, which was a massive economic overhaul driven by foreign institutions. And here, she extracts a vital lesson. Foreign laundry lists dumped by developed countries, they just aren't the answer. Nigeria needs tailor-made indigenous solutions. We then move through 1993's truncated democracy, right into the pivotal 1999 return to democracy. Finally, she brings us to 2023, which she cautiously labels a rejuvenated democracy, noting how various leaders have steered the national ship through some serious winds and waves to get to this critical juncture. Seeing it all laid out like this brilliantly illustrates her whole concept. By charting out this timeline, history transforms from just something you read in a textbook into a real-time diagnostic tool. By tracking exactly how the country handled independence, conflict, economic shifts, and military rule, she's giving the voters of 2023 a checklist. She's essentially asking, okay, which of the current candidates has a track record of actually learning from these specific historical stepping stones? Section 4, Crucial Lessons for 2023. From this century of data, she distills some very specific, actionable takeaways. There are 4 core lessons she believes modern voters absolutely must demand from their politicians. First, political independence brings a massive burden of responsibility and accountability. Second, she strongly advocates for local solutions over foreign imports. A united people has to fashion their own stature rather than just borrowing from someone else. Third, peace over internal conflict, because violence literally only retards progress. And finally, she argues that while good politics is nice and all, what Nigeria urgently needs are choice nation builders, leaders with a unity of purpose who can build strong institutions. And that leads to perhaps her most powerful takeaway of all. She writes, "Without social justice, democracy creates relatively few winners and a multitude of losers. That is a profound warning." She is pointing out that simply holding an election, just having a popular vote, is entirely insufficient without sovereign political will and genuine social justice. If the system is only rewarding a few people at the very top, well, then the democracy itself is failing the grading rubric. Section 5, the vision for victory. Now, an explainer of this framework wouldn't be complete without looking at how the public actually reacted to her highly structured, optimistic approach.
So, I want to pose this question directly to you. Does everyone agree with her vision of unity? I mean, it's a beautiful concept, right? A nation putting aside ethnic and religious prejudice to win together. But in a country as vast and as complex as Nigeria, does this unified historical rubric actually resonate with everyday citizens on the ground?
Well, this brings us to a fascinating counter-narrative found right in the comments section of her piece. One anonymous reader responded, "United Nigeria is a fallacy. Nigeria is a country of many nations, and only Super Eagles bind us together as one," complete with a laughing emoji. The Super Eagles, in case you didn't know, is the beloved national football team. This single comment brilliantly captures the deep, systemic complexity of the country. It challenges her core thesis head-on, suggesting that true political unity across so many distinct identities might be an impossible dream, unified only by sports, not politics. Yet despite those complexities and the skepticism, she concludes her piece with this ultimate rallying call to action: let Nigeria win. She leaves her readers with a framework that demands accountability, deep historical awareness, and a striving for real social justice. And it leaves us with a highly provocative thought to end on today. If you were to create a historical grading rubric for your own country, looking closely at your past conflicts, economic shifts, and constitutional changes, how would the politicians on your ballot actually grade out? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep asking the big questions.